Let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Rodero. I'm a Research Data Specialist at the State Water Resources Control Board and the Office of Research Planning and Performance. This webinar will cover the basics of the Urban Water Use Objective Report. I'll give an overview, which includes a live demonstration of the form, and then we will have Q&A as time permits. Presentation portion of the webinar will be recorded and posted to our website, and we will post these slides as well. Before we get started, just some quick housekeeping. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and we will try to get as many as we can. If you still have questions after the webinar is over, feel free to send an email to waterconservation@waterboards.ca.gov or to attend our virtual office hours on November 18th. We don't have a link yet, so watch out for an announcement from us. First, a very brief overview of the legislation that started all of this. AB 1668 and SB 606 were passed after California went through a multi-year drought from 2012 to 2017, and there was a recognition that we needed to transition into a more resilient framework rather than reacting to drought when it happened. But that wouldn't happen without necessary data. So the Department of Water Resources and the State Water Board were directed to come up with a more tailored, efficient water budget approach that would be very data-driven and localized to specific service area conditions. The resulting regulation establishes efficient water use standards and the corresponding formulas to calculate efficient water use budgets, and also lays out a framework for suppliers to implement performance measures for commercial, institutional, and industrial water use. The regulation also establishes corresponding annual reporting requirements. More specifically, the regulation establishes that the board will provide a machine-readable form and identifies what data points shall be reported, as well as which data shall be used to satisfy those requirements. Our staff put a lot of work into identifying data that is already reported to the State Water Board and other state agencies. For example, supply and demand data reported to the Safer Clearinghouse is utilized to satisfy reporting requirements for actual water use, and real water loss volumes reported to the Department of Water Resources are utilized to satisfy water loss reporting requirements. To prepare the data for use in the reporting form, we collect all of that data and post it on the Open Data portal along with documentation. We then use the Open Data API to load that data into the reporting form. It's not an entirely live connection, but the tables can be refreshed to reflect the latest updates to the data on the website. If you're interested in seeing those tables, the QR code in the bottom left will direct you to the Open Data page. There's also links within the reporting form itself to take you to those pages. All right. Now we move on to preparing to complete the report. So, different from last year, we have all of the required materials on our website, which is linked at the bottom of the page, also at that QR code. It contains guidance materials, FAQs, reporting form, other materials. The reporting form itself also does link to some of the materials on this page if for whatever reason you just can't find it again. There are two versions of the reporting form, but you only need to submit one of them. They are essentially the same form, but the version containing Visual Basic for Applications or VBA code enables features such as automatic hide reveal of rows, making the sheet act more like a dynamic form. Your organization security might block these features, so a version without VBA is also available just in case. You do also need to submit a signed certification statement along with the reporting form. Please use the digital certificate version unless you have technical issues that prevent you from using that one. All right, this table summarizes the data points that require approval before they can be utilized in the reporting form. Some data, like alternative data and special landscape areas, should be submitted to the Department of Resources. Others, like new construction and variances, should be submitted to the board. The specifics can be found in the guidance document that I mentioned previously. as well as separate guidance developed by the department. The variances and temporary provision requests have an October 1st deadline. So we are not accepting any more requests for this reporting cycle. Other data points, such as new construction and special landscape areas, do not have a fixed deadline, but we do recommend submitting them as early as possible to give staff adequate time to review all submitted documents. The data that populates the form can be viewed in the open data portal page linked at the bottom of the page. If you do notice that something is incorrect, either in the table or within the reporting form, corrections must be made in the source data sets that we obtained the values from. For quantities such as production and deliveries that can be directly edited in the clearinghouse, but other data, such as population values and SIDWIS, may require reaching out to the appropriate team at the department or the board. The tables will be updated every Monday until mid-December. So it's not live updates. There will be a little bit of a lag if you submit corrections sometime before in the middle of that time period. Please don't wait until last minute to submit corrections. Changes might take time. All right. Moving on to the reporting form itself. So, just something that will be helpful as you fill out the form. The cells that are throughout the form, they're color coded to help determine which fields need to be completed by the user. Cells in the blue-gray range are pre-filled values and cannot be altered as the cells are locked. Green fields are mandatory and must be filled in. Gold fields are optional. Crosshatch formatting indicates the user shouldn't fill in that field regardless of the underlying color. And the formatting does sort of change based on prior responses, so make sure you just review everything before you turn it in. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and swap screens. So bear with me. Okay. Um, this is the form. I'm going to be showcasing the version that doesn't have VBA just so we can see all of the content and not have it hidden away. Um, I won't get to every tab in here, but please do look at the guidance document if you have any lingering questions, as we did try to be as thorough as possible. And, if even that doesn't suffice, then feel free to email us. So this is the very first tab you should go to before anything else. In this cell right here, you can either type or select your agency's name from the drop down. I'm just going to type it in. I'm going to pick on Amador Water Agency because they have multiple water systems. Um, this step is what enables your data to be pre-filled throughout the form. You also need to provide at least one person's contact information to satisfy the requirement. This tab was added as of this year. It provides a high-level summary of the requirements throughout the form with color coding to denote whether the requirement was satisfied, needs to be addressed, or is not applicable. And then the leftmost column links to the corresponding tab. So this is just a nice summary for you to check as you're filling out the form, before you submit, just to make sure that you didn't miss anything. The summary tab provides a breakdown of the objective and the corresponding reported water use. In the table below this, it also provides a high-level summary of the data points for each individual water system. If any data point is missing, the corresponding cell will be blank and highlighted. And then this is just an overall summary of each of the budgets of the objective. And then the final value is here. All right, moving on to the individual budgets. The residential indoor budget is entirely pre-filled from the basic budget calculation to the variances below it. And so as you can see, here's our first example of non-applicable formatting. This agency doesn't have any approved variances, so everything has that cross-hatching. Um, I'd also like to point out the yellow fields that are at the right of the table. This column is for the supplier staff to write notes and, communicate to one another. We won't be reviewing these fields or including them in the final data release. They're entirely for internal communication. This does differ from the yellow comment box at the bottom, which we will be reviewing and including in that final data release. All right, moving on to the residential outdoor budget. So much of this is also pre-filled. Um, Really, in here, there's only a single field that needs to be filled out, and as denoted by that green box, because it's blank, there's a red border around the box and a message to the right that says requires response, so you need to put something in there even if it's 0. Um, I would like to note, because we've had quite a few panicked emails regarding this, that the budget is currently calculating as 0 due to a lack of evaporation and effective precipitation information, which we receive from our colleagues at the Department of Water Resources. Once we have received that information, we will put it on open data and send out an announcement. When that happens, you should go to the data menu up here and hit that refresh all button, and then you should see the new data points. If you have any sort of issues, please reach out to us. I know that we actually just got an email yesterday from somebody whose firewall at their agency was preventing them from doing that data refresh. All right. I'm going to skip ahead to the real water loss budget. By default, the table here uses the agency's water loss standards if calculated or reported real loss. Um, if the audit data from the real water loss audit, if the water loss standard is not available or not applicable. Um, so when we scroll down to that second table, this one contains the data for the number of service connections and length of mains, which also comes from that water loss audit. And it shows the time period that this information corresponds to. If you would like to provide alternative values for those service connections and length of mains, because maybe you have a audit that you haven't submitted yet, but will be submitting, you can click this water loss audit values due January 1, 2026, fill out that information, and then that will be used instead in the calculation. Okay. Um, In the actual water use tab, we can see again that most of these fields are pre-filled, this time with aggregated data from the Safer Clearinghouse. If we scroll down, there are two questions regarding the volume of water delivered to the highest water using residential customers. So we have examples of how to do percentile calculations for CII customers on our website. And that is a very similar procedure to what you would do here. So you can use that as an example if you're not sure how to proceed. If you are unable to obtain the billing data in time to complete these values for this report, you can enter unknown or in one or both of the boxes, and that'll satisfy the reporting requirement for this year. The bottom of the page contains questions regarding any discrepancies with the LAM data that the user might want to address. If you don't have that information, just feel free to answer no, and that will satisfy those requirements. In this tab, it defaults to using the real water loss values that are on open data to satisfy the reported real water loss requirement. Um, but if you change the green drop down to either one of these other two options, either water loss audit due January 1, 2026 or own estimate, then you would go down, fill out this second table in all of the green boxes. Okay, The SPX 7x7 backstop is one of the wonkier pieces of the legislation. Put simply, it's a ceiling on the objective. So if the objective plus exclude demands exceeds the SPX 7x7 target volume, the objective will be capped. The backstop volume is the sum of the SPX 7x7 target volume, processed water, and recycled water. By default, these two volumes will be zero, but if you have either of those two types of water in your service area, you can report these quantities as a percentage of reported delivery. So for example, if 10% of your potable industrial deliveries are processed water, you'd put a 10% there and it would update, although in this case, it's zero, so it doesn't really change anything. Um, All right. So those are the budget calculations. Now we're moving on to the CII best management practices. I would like to note that even though these have future deadlines, you are still required to report on progress towards implementing these BMPs, and so that's why you'll still see, required information for each of these. So, the first part of the CII best management practices is asks about how many CII customers you have classified for each of these categories here. You don't have to have your customers fully classified until June 30th, 2027. But you are still supposed to be reporting on progress you made towards classification, so enter a number in each of these boxes, even if it's zero. Here is where you would specify what the units are for CII water users. It could be connections, it could be accounts, it could be something else entirely. Just make sure that you choose something that you can keep consistent throughout each of these four tabs. The next performance measure section has to do with converting CII landscapes with mixed use meters to dedicated irrigation meters or employing in lieu technologies. So this is another one that has a future deadline, but you're still supposed to provide information on which method you're going to use and some other stuff below. So um, for this example, we're going to choose the first method to identify large landscapes. And then this is another one where, for now, if you don't have this information, you can enter unknown in the boxes and that'll satisfy those reporting requirements. Below that, questions about DIMS in lieu technologies and then some follow-up information. The third part of the performance measure section has to do with implementing best management practices for water users that exceed a recommended size, volume of water use, or other threshold. So there's a couple parts to this. This first is a table where you just essentially have to provide a couple things. One, the number of disclosable buildings identified pursuant to 974A. So we have a more detailed procedure laid out in the guidance document, but essentially it's a spreadsheet that you download. You filter to your zip code or service area or whatever, and you just figure out the number of buildings and you enter that number here. And then the second part is the number of CII customers for which the supplier has provided information required to 974B, which is essentially the meter's serial number and aggregate water use data in monthly intervals. Now, the last part is requires you selecting a method here for identifying which customers would be offered best management practices. And for simplicity and time's sake, I'm going to choose 974C1 because that is the least detailed of the three. But You only have to do one, even though there are 6 tabs following this, you only have to do one, and that's going to correspond to the method that you chose. So as you can see here, I chose 974C1, which means that I'm going to fill out this tab. If you actually go to these other tabs, you'll see that it says tab does not correspond to this method, do not complete, and everything has been crossed out. In the 974C1 tab, it asks for a few things. So for example, the number of CII water users at or above the 97.5th percentile for CII water use. We have a link to a spreadsheet that contains some practical examples of how to do those calculations. So if you're lost, I would highly recommend looking at these. Furthermore, asks for the water savings associated with those BMPs. And then you do the same thing for the 80th percentile. Below that, um, we have the BMPs that are being offered to the suppliers for each of these subcategories of BMPs. Now, if you haven't implemented any BMPs yet, then you can just scroll down and respond not applicable in progress. But otherwise, just fill in each of these green boxes. Optionally, if you have more than 2 BMPs that you would like to share, you can fill in these yellow boxes as well. And then you do the same thing for the 80th percentiles. Okay. Um, I am going to stop here and go back to the presentation. I know that I didn't get to everything, but um, we will have those office hours on November 18th. If you want to ask more questions, we'll have the Q&A after this. And then hopefully we'll answer your questions. And if all else fails, email us. Okay, from current slide. Juggling this is always fun. Okay. Once you have everything, you've gone through each tab, you've checked the requirements to make sure that everything's filled out, you're ready to submit. So what do you do? Just, review that final checklist one more time. Make sure that the messages in red are addressed prior to submittal. Along with the actual reporting form, you do need to include that certification statement with your report submission. It can be signed by general manager, supervisor, essentially anyone with authority to give final approval at your organization. You will be uploading the form to the WUI data portal, the same place where reports such as the Urban Water Management Plan are submitted, I believe. You're going to be going to um, I think it's the I forget which one. It should say Urban Water Use Objective Report or something like that. But essentially, you're going to go here and you're going to upload your documents in this place here. So you upload the reporting form under the reporting form document type. Regardless of the file name that you have when you upload it, it will be renamed once it's uploaded to the portal. And then upload the signed certification statement under the certification statement document type. At the bare minimum, those are the 2 things that you should provide. And then you click submit button here. Once that happens, you should receive a confirmation to the email address associated with the WUI portal account. If your agency does not have an account yet, please do that now because it can take a while to get an approved account. So please don't do that at the last minute. All right, this is an overview of what our timeline looks like on the staff side. So once we receive those reports on January 1st, then we're going to be going through each of the reports, extracting the data, doing QA/QC on the data, updating the various data sets based on reported information, putting it up on open data, and then also generating compliance summaries. Probably somewhere towards the end of this time period, like end of April, you should receive a PDF that contains a um, summary of, like what you like the high level summary of your objective versus reported use and other things like that. And it's a very nice summary. You can, give it to your board, your general manager, whatever, and just like sort of be like, look, we completed it. Um, so the next fiscal year, so the prior fiscal year ends June 30th, and then the next fiscal year begins July 1st. So this is where the time period where your data starts. Um, we will be compiling the data for the previous fiscal year, so July 1st to June 30th, putting that up on open data. October 1st, that's when those variance and temporary provision requests are due. And then we will hopefully release the final reporting form. I believe we released it very close to the end of September this year. So just be on the lookout for that. We'll send out an announcement when it's ready. We'll also finish posting the data to the open data portal. And then throughout October to mid-December, we're going to be periodically updating those data tables. So final reminders, reports are due January 1st. Please try to, make sure, because I know it's the holidays around that time, if staff are planning to go on vacation, make sure you have a plan in place to get it turned in on time. Make sure before you submit that that data is refreshed. Um, and then, I guess I've said many times, and I'm going to say it again, the guidance document on our website has all the information provided in this webinar and more. And then finally, we're going to have a Q&A session on November 18th. That is the end of the slideshow. So